In this video, we're going to move on to within subjects designs. Now, if you remember, in the previous videos, we talked about between subjects or independent measures design. So that is where we have data from two completely different or independent participant groups. These two samples are independent of each other. Now, in a within subjects or repeated measures design, there's different ways we can have a within subjects or repeated measures design, and we're going to just present to you a few of them. But the idea is that we have data from the same or a related group of participants. So here we have one sample. We collect data before, perhaps we have some sort of intervention, and then we collect data after. And then we compare the data before to the data after. So we have one set of individuals and that measurement's been repeated. Another way is perhaps we take that sample and we measure that data at time 1, time 2, and time 3. This could be over time, or perhaps it could be 3 different conditions. So now we're just going to briefly talk about some general characteristics of our within subjects design. Again, the idea is that we use a single group of participants. There's only one group that we're using. We're not splitting them into different conditions or anything like that. This one group of participants is going to do every manipulation that we might have in this experiment. So the study repeats the measurements of the same individuals under each of the treatment conditions. So again, that's why it's called a repeated measures design, or I more often use that term within subjects. So here are just 2 examples. I showed you the pre and post, the before and after on the other slide. Here that maybe you have one set of participants and participants are measured in the first treatment, then they're measured in the second treatment, and then they're measured in the third treatment. Now, you might notice that if you were to do this in the same order for all your participants, maybe what happens in this treatment affects what happens in that treatment. And we'll talk about how we control for that later on. Or perhaps you have one sample of participants and all the treatments are administered together, perhaps at the same time. Maybe one group gets one treatment first and another group gets another treatment first. So here's an example. An experimenter wants to compare the effects of visual illusions under 2 lighting conditions. The same set of 20 participants are shown the set of visual illusions in a brightly lit room and a dimly lit room. The number of effective illusions are compared. So here's just an example of one visual illusions. If you look, you can see do you see a cat or do you see a mouse? So here's the mouse. Here's the cat ears. The cat eyes. If you're looking for the mouse, you still don't see it. Here's the mouse eyes and the mouse teeth. So for these visual illusions, you have, again, the same set of participants in the dimly lit room and then in the brightly lit room. Now, what we'll discuss later on is that we would want to counterbalance that and have if we had some individuals dimly lit, then brightly lit, we'd want to have others that were in the brightly lit condition first and then the dimly lit condition. And we'll talk about why and how we do that in a subsequent video. Here's another example. Researchers used fMRI to examine the brains of participants that had just fallen madly in love. They were interested in if there was a difference in the activation of a brain region called the caudate when participants were looking at their beloved. While undergoing fMRI, they alternated between looking at a picture of their beloved and a picture of a neutral person of the same age and sex. Brain activity in the caudate was compared. So here again, one group of participants, the treatment's all happening at the same time. They're intermittently showing pictures of the beloved and pictures of a neutral same-sex individual. So the idea is that, there's just different sets up, and I don't have an example for a pre and post, but we'll talk about those later on.